They left him to die where the trees could swallow the truth. No radio, no backup. Just blood soaking into frozen earth and the slow, merciless breathing of Red Hollow as it closed around him. Deputy Reed Lawson lay pinned between pain and darkness, staring up at branches clawing the gray sky, knowing deep in his bones that someone had wanted him erased. Not arrested, not warned, erased. And the forest, ancient and loyal to secrets, was helping them finish the job. I share news stories here every day and would really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and liked my video. Now let's jump back into my story. I'm sure you love it. If you keep listening till the end, the wind carried a low whistle through the amber leaves, a sound like whispered names. Reed tried to move his fingers. Nothing. His leg burned, his side throbbed, and every breath felt borrowed. He remembered the last thing clearly, finding something buried in a rusted lockbox behind illegal logging markers. Names, dates, a badge number that should not have been there. Then footsteps. Then the blow. After that, silence. Write in the comments and tell me which part of the world you're watching this story from. I'm really interested to see how far this story has traveled miles away. The town of Willow's Edge, Vermont, moved like it always did, slow, cautious, half asleep. It was the kind of place where people locked doors out of habit, not fear, and where everyone believed the woods were beautiful, not dangerous. That belief would shatter before nightfall. Ellie Bell walked ahead on the trail, boots crunching softly over leaves, her shoulders squared like she was on watch. Harper followed a few steps behind, distracted by a cluster of mushrooms growing near a fallen log. Between them padded Shadow, their German shepherd, moving carefully on a back leg that never healed right. He had been limping since the accident 2 winters ago, but his eyes were sharp, alert, always scanning. "This path feels wrong," Ellie said, stopping suddenly. Harper looked up. "You say that about every path." Shadow froze. His ears snapped upright. His body stiffened, low growl vibrating in his chest, not loud, but serious. Ellie felt her stomach drop. Shadow didn't growl without reason. "Shadow?" She whispered. The dog bolted. "Hey, wait." Ellie shouted, already running. They crashed through brush, branches snapping back against their jackets. Harper nearly tripped, heart pounding so hard it hurt. Shadow disappeared over a small ridge, barking once sharp, urgent, and then they saw him. A man lay crumpled at the base of a tree, uniform dark with blood. One leg bent at a wrong angle. His face pale, eyes half open but unfocused. For one terrifying second, Ellie thought he was dead. Then his chest moved. "He's alive," Ellie breathed. Dropping to her knees, Harper's hands shook as she pulled the old flip phone from her pocket, the one their mom kept in the junk drawer just in case. She fumbled the buttons, swallowed hard, and pressed call. 911. "What's your emergency?" My sister and I found a police officer," Harper said, forcing the words out. "He's bleeding. Bad." Ellie pressed her scarf against the wound on his side, ignoring how warm and slick it felt. Shadow limped over and lay beside the man, body angled protectively, eyes never leaving the trees. Reed heard voices. Children's voices. He tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. A small hand pressed down, steady, brave. "You're okay," Ellie said, though she wasn't sure she believed it. "Help's coming." Sirens felt like a lifetime away in a cold apartment across town. Their mother, Nora Bell, stared at unpaid bills when her phone rang. The words on the other end didn't make sense at first. "Injured officer. Woods, your daughters." Her knees buckled by the time the ambulance lights cut through Red Hollow. Dusk had fallen. Paramedics worked fast, exchanging looks that said how close it had been. One of them glanced at Ellie and Harper, eyes wide. "You stayed?" he asked. Ellie nodded. "We couldn't leave him." As Reed was lifted onto the stretcher, his fingers twitched. His eyes focused, just enough to see two small figures and a wounded dog standing guard. Against the dark, the forest watched them go, and somewhere deep among the trees, someone realized their mistake wasn't finished yet. The sirens faded, but Red Hollow didn't relax. The forest never did. It stood still, listening, as if memorizing the sound of the ambulance carrying Deputy Reed Lawson away. Leaves settled. Wind softened. And somewhere between the roots and the shadows, the truth stayed buried waiting. Reed drifted in and out of consciousness as the ambulance bounced along the narrow road. Every jolt sent lightning through his side. A paramedic kept talking, asking him questions, trying to keep him anchored. "Reed, stay with me. Can you hear me?" He could. Barely dot faces flashed in his Mideli's determined eyes. Harper's shaking hands, the dog's watchful stare. Kids, they had saved him. Kids had walked into a place grown men were afraid to touch. At Willow's Edge Community Hospital, the doors burst open. Nurses swarmed. Doctors shouted numbers. Blood pressure unstable. Internal bleeding suspected. Surgery now. As they cut away his uniform, something clattered to the floor. A mud-stained evidence tag tied to a small USB drive. The nurse almost tossed it aside, but Reed's hand twitched. "Don't," he whispered. They taped it to the tray. 3 hours later, Reed survived. Barely words spread faster than anyone expected. An injured deputy found in the woods. 2 young girls. A German shepherd that refused to leave his side. By morning, the story was everywhere. Local news, Facebook groups, whispered conversations at the gas station. But no one asked the most important question. Why was he there? Detective Naomi Fields stood at the edge of Red Hollow just after sunrise. Hands tucked into her coat, eyes sharp and unreadable. She'd taken over the case the moment Reed was stabilized. Naomi didn't believe in coincidences. And this town had too many. Illegal logging reports had been piling up for months. Equipment disappearing. Trails changing. Old boundary markers quietly moved. Reed had been the only one pushing hard, asking questions people didn't like, and now he was almost dead. Naomi crouched near the blood-stained dirt. Drag marks led deeper into the woods, then stopped. Someone had panicked. Someone hadn't finished the job. At the Bell apartment, Ellie scrubbed her hands raw in the sink. She could still feel the blood. Harper sat at the table, staring at Shadow's food bowl like it might explain something. Shadow lay near the door, restless, ears twitching at every sound. "They keep saying we're brave," Harper muttered. "I don't feel brave." Ellie didn't answer. She was thinking about the look on the man's face, not fear recognition. Like he knew the woods had turned on him. Their mother, Nora, watched them quietly. She wanted to pull them close, lock the doors, pretend none of it had happened. But she saw something new in their eyes, something heavier. That afternoon, Detective Fields knocked. "I just want to ask a few questions," she said gently. Ellie told her everything. The growl. The running. The blood. Harper described the phone call, her voice barely steady. Naomi listened without interrupting, eyes flicking occasionally to Shadow. "Did either of you notice anything else?" Naomi asked. "Anything strange?" Ellie hesitated. "Shadow keeps trying to go back." Naomi's jaw tightened. That night, Reed woke up screaming. Monitors blared. Nurses rushed in. He thrashed, gasping, sweat-soaked. Naomi was there within minutes. "They know," he rasped when he saw her. "They know I found it." "Found what?" she asked. Reed's eyes darted to the door. "My dad." Naomi froze. Reed's father had been a cop too. Disappeared 20 years ago. Officially unsolved. Quietly forgotten, he vanished in Red Hollow. Reed whispered. Same area. Same people. I found his radio, buried with new fingerprints. Naomi felt the pieces click together. In a way she didn't like. Someone had been protecting something for decades, and too little. Girls had just stepped right into it, outside. Shadow stood up suddenly and growled at the dark window. The forest was calling again. The woods didn't sleep that night. Fog slid low between the trees. Thick and slow, wrapping Red Hollow in silence so deep it felt deliberate. The kind of silence that listened back. From the Bell apartment window, Ellie stared at the dark outline of the forest. Her stomach twisted in knots she couldn't explain. Shadow paced. Stop, sniff, whine. Repeat, he's never like this. Harper whispered from her bed. Ellie didn't answer. She was already pulling on her jacket. You're not serious, Harper said, sitting up. He's trying to show us something, Ellie replied. He's been trying all day. They moved quietly, not waking their mother. Shadow froze when the door opened, then limped forward eagerly, tail stiff with purpose. The night air bit hard as they slipped toward the tree line. Red Hollow swallowed them whole. The beam from Ellie's flashlight cut a narrow path through the fog. Every snapped twig made Harper flinch. Shadow led them off the trail, nose low, weaving through brush until they reached a small clearing half hidden by fallen branches. Then Shadow stopped. He began digging. Shadow. No, Ellie whispered, but the dog didn't listen. Dirt flew. His breathing grew rough, urgent. Harper dropped to her knees, brushing away loose soil. Something dark appeared. Metal Ellie's breath caught. She pulled harder, fingers scraping against cold steel until the object came free. Broken police radio. Cracked and rusted, antenna bent. On the back, barely visible under caked mud, were carved letters. R.L. Harper stared. Those are his initials. Ellie's heart pounded. Or his dad's. A sound snapped through the trees. Footsteps. Shadow's head jerked up. Teeth bared. A low warning rumbling in his chest. Ellie killed the flashlight. The fog thickened, shapes shifting just beyond sight. Run. Ellie mouthed. They didn't wait. Branches tore at their clothes as they fled. Shadow limping but relentless. Somewhere behind them, a light flicked on. A voice hissed angry. Close. They burst onto the main trail and didn't stop until town lights burned their eyes by morning. Detective Naomi Field stood in the same clearing, radio in hand. Reed, pale and limping on borrowed strength, stood beside her. His face drained of color when he saw the initials. That's my dad's. He said quietly. Naomi exhaled through her teeth. Someone kept this. And someone didn't want me to find it, Reed replied. Back at the hospital. Forensic techs confirmed it new fingerprints. Layered over old ones. Recent, careless. Like whoever buried it believed no one would ever dig there again. They were wrong. Naomi followed the trail outward. Illegal logging sites. Private land illegally leased. A shell company tied to a former county official. Names surfaced that still carried weight in Willow's Edge. That evening, a black truck idled to long outside the Bell apartment. Ellie saw it first. She didn't say anything. Just pulled Harper away from the window. Shadow stood between them and the door, hackles raised. Across town, Reed stared at a map pinned with red markers. The pattern was undeniable now. His father hadn't vanished. He'd uncovered the same thing and paid the price. Ah. Knock echoed through the Bell apartment. Nora opened the door to find Detective Fields. Face tight. You need to pack a bag, Naomi said calmly. Just essentials. Why? Nora asked. Because someone is asking questions they shouldn't be, Naomi replied. eyes flicking to the hallway. "About your daughters." Shadow growled. The forest had let them leave once. It wouldn't be so kind again. They didn't pack much. They didn't have time. Nora Bell moved on instinct, shoving clothes into a duffel while her heart hammered against her ribs. Ellie watched the hallway like it might suddenly open and swallow them. Harper clutched Shadow's collar, fingers buried deep in his fur. As if letting go would mean losing everything. "Where are we going?" Harper asked. "Somewhere safe," Detective Naomi Fields said. Though her eyes didn't promise comfort-only urgency. The black truck was gone when they stepped outside. But the absence felt worse than its presence, like a predator that had stepped back just far enough to strike. They relocated to an old ranger cabin on the edge of state land off the map, forgotten and cold. Naomi stationed a single deputy nearby. Not more. Too many eyes invited questions. That night, wind rattled the windows like knuckles. Shadow refused to sleep. Reed arrived just before midnight. Leaning heavily on a cane he clearly wasn't ready to use. His face tightened when he saw the girls. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "None of this should have touched you." Lee shook her head. "You would have died." Reed didn't argue. They spread maps across the cabin table. Naomi laid out what she'd found shell companies tied to illegal logging. Evidence laundered through fake environmental cleanups. Land quietly stripped and resold. Money flowed upward. Silence flowed downward. "My dad tried to stop it," Reed said. "They made sure he disappeared before it could go public." "And when you found his radio," Naomi added. They tried again. A crack echoed outside. Not thunder. Shadow exploded into motion, barking furiously. Reed reached for his gun. Naomi killed the lights. Down. She whispered another crack closer. Glass shattered. Nora screamed as a bullet tore through the window frame, lodging in the wall inches from where Ellie's head had been. Shadow lunged toward the door, snarling like something feral and unstoppable. "Back door now." Naomi shouted. They ran. The forest greeted them with open arms and no mercy. Trees blurred past as they plunged into darkness, breath burning, fear sharp enough to taste. Somewhere behind them, footsteps crashed through brush. A flashlight beam swept wildly. Shadow doubled back suddenly, barking, drawing attention away. A gunshot rang out. Shadow yelped. "Shadow!" Harper cried, trying to turn back. Reed grabbed her. "He's doing his job." Another shot. Then silence. They hid beneath a fallen tree, pressed into mud, barely breathing. Minutes stretched into eternity before the forest swallowed the sounds of pursuit. When they finally dared move, Shadow limped out of the darkness, blood on his flank, but alive. Harper collapsed against him, sobbing. "They're escalating," Naomi said grimly. "They know we're close." By morning, Naomi made a decision she'd been avoiding. "We go public," she said. "Today." Reed hesitated. "If we do that, they'll panic," Naomi finished. "And people make mistakes when they panic." The evidence dropped like a bomb. Documents, fingerprints, photos of hidden sites. The broken radio. News vans flooded Willow's Edge. Names long respected were suddenly whispered with disgust. But exposure came with a price. That afternoon, Reed received an anonymous call. "You should have stayed buried," a voice said, "just like your father." Reed didn't hang up. "I'm not alone," he replied. Neither were Ellie and Harper. That evening, the town gathered in a way it hadn't in years, neighbors standing shoulder to shoulder, eyes open now. The woods weren't just pretty anymore. They were complicit, and somewhere deep in Red Hollow, someone realized the forest was no longer on their side, because the truth had roots, and roots don't die quietly. Willow's Edge had never seen chaos like this. News vans clogged the narrow streets. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder outside the courthouse, microphones raised, voices urgent. Names once spoken with respect were now whispered like curses. Illegal logging cover-ups, a missing officer, an attempted murder. And at the center of it, all two girls, a wounded dog, and a forest that had finally given up its secrets. Ellie watched from the courthouse steps, her hands shoved deep into her jacket pockets. Harper stood close, shadow pressed against her legs, bandaged but unbroken. He scanned the crowd constantly, ears flicking at every sudden movement. They're still out there. Harper murmured. Ellie nodded. She felt it too. Exposure didn't erase danger, sharpened it. Inside, Detective Naomi Fields laid out the final pieces. Financial records traced money to a private land management firm run by men who had worn town uniforms for decades. Evidence logs showed items disappearing, then reappearing altered. And finally, Loredia Reed's father's radio proved the timeline had been falsified. The room went quiet when Reed spoke. "They didn't just kill my father," he said steadily. "They erased him. And when I found the proof, they tried to erase me too. A judge signed warrants within the hour. But power doesn't surrender easily." That night, a fire broke out at the edge of Red Hollow. Flames climbed the trees like something alive, orange and hungry. Fire crews rushed in, but Naomi knew immediately wasn't an accident. "They're destroying evidence," she said. "Or trying to." Reed grabbed his jacket. "They're going to the old logging hub. That's where it started." Ellie overheard. "We can show you the trail," she said before anyone could stop her. Naomi hesitated. "Absolutely not." But Shadow stood up. He barked one sharp. Sertanand limped toward the door. The hub sat deep in the woods, hidden behind false markers and overgrown paths. Smoke thickened the air as they approached. Sirens wailed somewhere far behind them. To slow, a truck roared to life near the clearing. "Stop." Reed shouted. The truck lurched forward and stalled. Shadow had sunk his teeth into a dangling cable, yanking it free despite the pain. The engine died with a cough. A man bolted from the driver's side, panic all over his face. Naomi tackled him before he made it 10 steps. The clearing revealed everything burned barrels. Falsified permits, old evidence tags, and beneath a loose panel in the ground, a shallow grave. Reed dropped to his knees. They didn't need DNA to know the arrests came fast after that. Confessions followed. Fear loosened tongues. The truth spilled out in pieces, ugly and undeniable. The forest hadn't been hiding a monster, had been forced to protect one. Days later, Willow's Edge gathered again. This time, in silence. A small marker was placed near Red Hollow, not a grave, but a promise. The missing were no longer forgotten. The lies were done. Ellie squeezed Harper's hand as Reed spoke to the crowd. "My father believed in doing the right thing, even when it was dangerous," he said. So did two girls who didn't walk away. Shadow sat proudly at their feet. Tail thumping, the town applauded, not loudly. But honestly, because courage didn't roar, it stayed. One part remained: the forest. Quiet now. Weighted. Winter came early to Willow's Edge. Snow dusted the roofs, softened the streets, and quieted Red Hollow in a way it hadn't been in decades. The forest stood still, now not watchful, not hungry, just tired. As if it had finally exhaled after holding its breath for 20 long years. Ellie and Harper walked the familiar trail again, boots crunching over frost, Shadow moving steadily between them. His limp was still there, but lighter somehow, like the pain no longer owned him. None of them spoke at first. The woods felt different, honest. At the clearing, a small wooden marker stood where the shallow grave had been. No name carved yet. Just a badge etched into the surface and the words, "You were not forgotten." Reed Lawson stood nearby, had in his hands. He looked older now, not from age, but from truth. Some weight had lifted. Another had settled in its place. "I used to hate this place," he said quietly. "Thought the forest took my father from me." Ellie looked around. Sunlight slipped through bare branches, gentle and clean. "It didn't," she said. "People did." Reed nodded. "The forest just kept the secret until someone brave enough came along." Harper glanced down at Shadow and smiled. He knew. Shadow wagged his tail once, proud and calm. Life didn't snap back to normal. It rebuilt, slow, careful, intentional. The illegal operations were gone. Old officials faced sentences instead of praise. Trails were reopened, this time with signs that told the truth about what had happened there. At school, Ellie and Harper were still just kids. Homework, chores, arguing over who got the last pancake. But people looked at them differently now. Not like celebrities, like reminders. Reed launched the Junior Lifesaver program that spring, teaching kids what to do when something felt wrong and, more importantly, when to stay. He made sure Ellie and Harper never stood in front of the room alone. Heroes shouldn't be put on pedestals, he said. They should be understood. Shadow received a civilian service medal in a small ceremony behind the station. He tried to chew it off. Sunday dinners became a tradition. Reed came every week, bringing stories, laughter, and sometimes silence that felt warm instead of heavy. Nora baked again. The apartment smelled like cinnamon and healing. And Red Hollow. Red Hollow stayed quiet. One evening, Ellie stood at the edge of the woods as snow fell softly, flakes melting against her gloves. She thought about that first day, the blood, the fear, the choice. About how easy it would have been to turn back. Harper joined her. "Do you think it'll ever happen again?" she asked. Ellie shrugged. "Maybe. Would you do it again?" Ellie didn't hesitate. "Yes, because courage isn't loud. It doesn't wear uniforms or make speeches. Sometimes it looks like two small figures on a forgotten trail. And a wounded dog who refuses to leave. The forest hadn't chosen them. They had chosen what was right. And that made all the difference. If this story moved you even a little, remember this: the world changes when ordinary people refuse to walk away. Drop a comment and tell me what part touched you the most. Like the video if you believe courage can come from anywhere. Subscribe or follow for more powerful true-style stories like this, because I share new ones every day. And somewhere deep in Red Hollow, the trees stood silent. Not guarding secrets anymore, but keeping peace.